Okay, I probably don't need the mic, do I? Probably not. I talk loud anyway. Okay, I just want to get started with you guys. Thank you, Alderman Arnwood, for pulling this together. My name is Stephanie Robinson. I am supervisor in community relations at Ameren. I am your point of contact. So if you need any concerns, if you have any concerns or any issues within your ward, I'm the person that you would reach out to, and I'm going to get it taken care of. But what I'm here today to talk about is the infrastructure investment bill that we are now currently working on, and we are really here to ask for your support in, with this bill. And so we're wanting you to move a bill forward on this in support of this. So today with me is Rick Eastman. He's one of the executives in government relations, and Marty Cortez. She is the director of business and community relations. So that's my boss. So whenever I'm not doing something right, then that's who you call. But you won't be calling her because I'm always going to be doing something right. So let's just move forward. I know you guys, your time, we want to be value of your time. So Rick, you want to come on up and...
Thank you, Stephanie. Guys, thanks for letting us come in to do this. I'll be very brief. What I really want to do is walk you through, instead of doing a projector and a PowerPoint, I just made a handout of this. So if that's all right, I'll just walk you through this, and we'll talk some about what Ameren, Missouri, and Kansas City Power and Light, and Empire District Electric down near Joplin have been pursuing in the way of legislation in Jeff City at the Capitol for the last really 5 or 6 years. We've made great progress. We have more and more support for this type of infrastructure investment legislation, but we still have a handful of state senators who are not being supportive. So any support you can lend your voice to would be tremendous. So the title of the presentation is Powering Missouri's Future, Growing Our State's Economy with Smarter Energy Infrastructure Investments and Jobs. So if you would turn to slide 2 and take a look at those two pictures. The one on top of the other, they're dated 8 years apart. 2005 and 2013. Any wild guess what those are photos of, or what event they're taken at? No one ever knows, but it is the announcement of the Pope in those two different time periods, 2005, 2013. What do you notice different between those two photos?
Everybody has a cell phone.
Yes, sir. Cell phone, iPad, some kind of recording device in that bottom photo. So as the slide says, expectations for dependability for electricity or of electricity have never been higher and are rapidly increasing. And when I go out and do these presentations all over the state, people say, we do have more things plugged in today. Everybody uses more and more devices, so electricity demand must be on the increase. And actually it's not. When you look at these devices that we all have strapped to our hip or tucked away somewhere in a pocket, the energy required to charge these and use these is so minuscule compared to a 1960s air conditioner compressor or 1960s refrigerator motor. So believe it or not, demand for electricity is actually trending down, which is a good thing. Consumers are learning to conserve energy, to save energy, and it really does save all of us money. The problem with that model is Ameren, Missouri, and Casey Pinnell and Empire are really predicated on a funding model just like the highway and transportation system in Missouri is. MoDOT built their investment infrastructure model on sale of gallons of gasoline, right? Everybody would drive more. You would have more gasoline tax paid each year, so that always gave you increasing money to fund roads and bridges across the state. Well, the electricity model was the same. Back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, you saw demand for electricity go up as St. Louis suburbs grew out. You had expansion, shopping malls, the advent of air conditioning, again, caused a huge demand for new electricity. So there were always new revenues to be able to build out that infrastructure. Well, today with people using less electricity and more federal and state mandates for clean air laws and state mandates for renewable energy, the amount of money that Ameren, Missouri, and the other investor-owned electrics have to put back into the existing infrastructure, that pile of money is shrinking. So that's really what this legislation is intended to do, is to tweak the 100-year-old laws that govern how we do business to allow us to not lose as much of our money on these projects, to have more to put back into the infrastructure. So that's really the heart of the bill. So let's talk real quick about two recent events, and this kind of reinforces our point, sadly, guys, but we've had two underground transformer explosions in our state, in our two major metropolitan areas in the past 5 days. Last Sunday in Kansas City, down near the plaza, Kansas City Power and Light had a major transformer fire. Again, it was on a Sunday, so it didn't in fact impact a lot of businesses, but the photo you see on slide 3 shows some of the high-rise apartment complexes where people were without power for several hours last Sunday. So smoke, underground transformer fire, all the things that you've seen in the news. I won't go through all those bullets on the right, but those are some of the facts about what happened on May 7th. If you turn to slide 4, you will see that the very next day, this past Monday, we had a very similar event here in downtown St. Louis. So the Business Journal reported on May 8th what happened with us, and again, an underground transformer issue, some cables actually in this case, and we had smoke and fire and had to wait until we could get things cooled down and extinguished before we could get crews in to assess it. But it did impact 950 customers of Ameren, Missouri in downtown St. Louis. And about 4 years ago, we produced a video on aging infrastructure, and we talked about this because in June of 2013, we had a very similar incident on a weekday about 5 p.m., and there were people stranded in elevators and those kind of things. So these are the things, guys, that aging infrastructure that we are facing more and more. Much of the equipment that we still have in service, it works well today, but much of it is coming to its end of service life. A lot of this equipment was installed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And even though we're investing $800 million a year, just Ameren, Missouri, $800 million a year back into our existing infrastructure, we're starting to lose ground with that as this equipment ages and comes to its end of life. If you'll turn to slide 5, you will see some of what I have described to you just briefly about declining usage for new electricity. That line graph you see shows back in 1950 and 60, you were still in that 8 to 10% increase in demand for electricity each year. Today, in 2017, we're down to, we're certainly flat, if not declining. We're actually seeing new demand for electricity go negative. So that is one of the things that impacts the revenue, again, or the dollars we have to invest in our infrastructure. Take a look at those photos on slide 5, guys. Some of those, the transmission lines are not a photo that I took, but the transformer that shows some rust on the cabinet, that was a photo I took back in 2013 in the St. Louis metropolitan area. I won't tell you which substation, but granted, rust on a cabinet does not indicate it's about ready to fail, but it does indicate some of the age of this equipment. The photo in the bottom right on slide 5, those are underground cables that were taken in a manhole when I was over by Lumiere Place. So, and as you know, we also had an outage a couple of years ago with that downtown casino property. Many of those cables that you see in that photo are 80 to 100 years old. So those are the things we want to certainly work to address more in the city of St. Louis. Slide 6, you will see where Ameren, Missouri stands relative to other investor-owned electric utilities across the country in terms of investment in infrastructure. And people say, well, why don't you spend more? We said, guys, based on the model that we are regulated by the Missouri Public Service Commission, we are spending about as much as we can under the way the rules are today, $800 million a year. But that $800 million a year puts us just below the midpoint in the 4th quartile, as you see on that yellow highlighted bar. So we're in the bottom 1/8 of U.S. utilities because of these minimally supportive regulatory policies. What we have determined is a place that we would move us forward and not have a dramatic impact on our customers' rates, as we want to invest in this plan that we've already filed with the Missouri Public Service Commission that would take us to the midpoint, right at the break point between the 2nd and 3rd quartile. And that would give us an extra $200 million a year for the next 5 years for a total of $1 billion incremental or additional investment on top of the $800 million we're already spending each year. So that's what's the genesis of this legislation that we have proposed. And the impact of that would be about $1 a month added to customers' electric bills to get us to the midpoint on this graph. Slide number 7, you know, I've spent my whole life in Missouri, guys. I was born and raised in a little town up the Mississippi River about an hour and a half north of here called Louisiana, Missouri, a booming metropolitan area. Sorry. But, you know, I was thinking last night, I didn't tell you guys this story, but growing up in Louisiana, you know, you either went to Hannibal, Quincy, or St. Louis for something to do, unless you played in a basement band, which most of us did in Louisiana. But I thought my dad would let me bring the car and bring my younger brother down to Blues games, Cardinals games, concerts at the old Kiel Auditorium in the early 70s. I'm not sure that was wise, but that's what he let us do. So, you know, I love St. Louis, and I've worked for Ameren now for 33 years, and I want to see this city and all of our customers prosper as a result of making investments. Having said that, I look at this map. Missouri is one of 4 states that has never really significantly updated our regulatory policies. We're joined by the likes of West Virginia, Montana, and Idaho. The states in the light and dark green shadings have much more progressive regulatory policies, and that's where all the jobs and the growth due to investment in the infrastructure are going. We're being surrounded by these other states that are more progressive than Missouri. So while I'm proud to say I'm from the show me state, when I look at this map, I'm starting to think we're from the slow me state. We are really becoming last in terms of jobs creation and investment in our electric infrastructure. Slide 8 is one that we often get asked when we're out in the communities, guys. People will say, well, why can't you just spend more on infrastructure? Based on the reasons I described to you, that's really why we can't, that the revenues just aren't there. But the real crux of this is based on this example I'm about to share with you. Just about a mile or a mile and a half west of here, right behind, I guess it's the Goodwill store now, used to be the old famous bar warehouse right on I-64, Highway 40. There's a big substation called the Central Substation that Ameren, Missouri owns and operates. It was very old, and so about 3 or 4 years ago, I guess back in 2010, 2011 timeframe, we said we're going to rehab that substation. It serves the St. Louis University Hospital, it serves the Washington University Medical School, the Fox Theater, many businesses that really you don't want to have without electricity. So as we rehab that, we borrow much of the capital to do these major projects. We have to go to the banks and the credit markets, and we borrow this money. Well, if it's a 2 or 3 year window to build a project, you're paying compounding interest on that borrowed capital the entire time. I'm speaking to the bankers now. And also, the asset begins to depreciate. The minute it goes into service, the Public Service Commission said it has to be used and useful, benefiting customers, so it's got to be a completed project, turned on and feeding customers electricity before you can come and ask for cost recovery of that project through a rate increase. So say it takes 2 years to build a project, then we have the allowance for funds used during construction stops at the end of that period. We continue to pay compounding interest, and asset depreciation is lost for anywhere from, say, 2 to 3 years during the time it takes us to file the next rate case, and the PSC has 11 months to review that rate case. So my crude example is we go into the PSC with a shoebox full of receipts, set it down and go, here's the project for Central Substation, here's one for a substation over here, here's one in Excelsior Springs, Kirksville, Jeff City, Lake of the Ozarks, Cape Girardeau. All the projects are in there. PSC says, thank you, we have 11 months to review your shoebox full of receipts. They look at each project and go, well, there were 12 porta potties on this job site, 6 would have been enough, we're going to disallow 6 of those, as an example. That's how they review each and every project. At the end of that, they'll come back and say, okay, based on our prudency review and the need for these projects, we will allow you to go to your customers and ask for cost recovery through a rate increase to cover the money you've already spent. The trouble is, the compounding interest we have been paying on these projects, on that borrowed money, and the loss of depreciation on the assets, those dollars are not captured. They're completely ignored. Some people say, well, that's regulatory lag. It's really regulatory loss. Those dollars are lost. So back to my substation example from over here on the Central Sub, that project cost $38 million when we finished it. It went into service in November of 2012. We paid our crews, we paid ABB for the transformers, we paid the guy that puts the fence around it, the security cameras, the gravel, everybody got paid for that project. About 2 years later, we filed for a rate increase, or a regulatory rate review, I should say. The PSC took 11 months to review it, and they came back and said, okay, that was a good project, but it's not worth $38 million, it's worth $26 million. So we'll amortize the $26 million over the next 30 or 40 years. That's what you can collect. So there are basically $10 to $12 million that were just lost under that scenario for that project. So for every capital project we do just like that one, that's the scenario that we're governed by under today's regulatory laws. And that's really money that if we had that, a way to capture those dollars, that's more money to put back in our existing energy grid. So that's partly what the legislation is really designed to address. Energy policies do matter. Guys, on slide 9, you will see that our sister company, Ameren, Illinois, has moved forward with great leaps and bounds since their legislature passed a bill in 2011 to allow for grid modernization in that state. So these are some of the benefits. Ameren, Illinois, it's closer to $600 million almost now that they've spent on electric and gas distribution improvements since 2011. We've had outage frequency and duration down 17% and 18% respectively. They've installed smart meters on much of their system. Probably 60 to 70% of their customers now have smart meters installed. Their Grid Modernization Index has come up. That's a nationwide look at state by state, utility by utility, and Illinois is ranked state number 2 now as a progressive infrastructure policy. And I guess the best benefit is they've improved dependability for customers so they have fewer outages, but in the process of doing this grid hardening, they've hired 677 brand new permanent employees and more than 1,000 contractors to do this work. So Governor Greitens certainly would like to see Missouri follow suit with what Illinois has done. Slide 10 is a pretty good example of what I'm talking about when you compare Missouri to Illinois. Ameren, Missouri, we have been very benevolent. We have downsized through attrition. We've not had layoffs. But since really, if you go back even a little further to about 2009, we are down just about 700 employees. When people retire, they've not been replaced by and large. You know, we evaluate each position, determine how their workload could be reassigned, or if someone needs to be hired to fill that position, we certainly do that. But Ameren, Missouri is down 15% staffing-wise since 2010. Ameren, Illinois is up 25% in hiring. When you look at the right-hand line graph, you can see that capital expenditures in Illinois due to grid investment is up 22% from 2010 through 2016. Ameren, Missouri is still increasing, but at a much slower rate. We're up 4% over the compound annual growth rate for that 6 or 7 year window. So infrastructure investment really does mean jobs and economic growth. So as we looked at legislation, particularly in 2016, the Missouri Public Service Commission and the legislature said, how will we know what you're going to do if this bill gets passed? What specifically will you do in terms of projects? So last September of 2016, on the 23rd of September, we filed a very sizable infrastructure investment plan at the PSC and said if legislation is passed to enable us, you know, the legislature is the lawmakers, the PSC is the law enforcers. So the PSC said if they pass legislation that gives us more flexibility in this, we will certainly work to help you implement your plan. We will oversee the implementation of these projects. So we filed a 5-year, $1 billion grid modernization plan, and in that it's very specific as to how much would be spent on transmission, how much on St. Louis downtown underground network, how much on distribution, how much on smart meters, but it would be an incremental $200 million a year for 5 years to get to the $1 billion. And again, that's added to the $800 million we're already spending a year. So we'd go to right at $1 billion a year for the next 5 years. All the economists we've talked with estimated direct and indirect jobs as a result of that plan would be 3,300 new jobs that would be created as a result of that. I'm just about done, I promise. Slide 12 shows that as a result of this grid modernization and $1 billion investment over the 2018 through 2022 period, that's where the dollars would go. Distribution, you know, which is the voltage around communities from substations to homes and businesses, that would be $646 million of the $1 billion. And you can see the other numbers there, transmission, sustainable energy, and the total is just right at $1 billion. Some of the distribution components that are included in the 646 you'll see in that middle box on the left bar graph on slide 12. The right side shows a map that shows where the investment dollars would be. St. Louis, obviously being the heart and soul of Ameren, Missouri, would have the lion's share of those investments. But you can also see up in northeast Missouri near Kirksville, central Missouri, north central Missouri, where some of the darker green is, and even down in the Boot Heel, there would be some other investments made to harden our infrastructure there, and some dollars really spread across all of our service territory that are shown even in the light green. So every part of our system would get some attention. So we also ask all of our economists and folks that we work with, what's the payback on this? For every dollar we invest in the grid, how does it benefit consumers? And you can see on the slide 13 right side chart, we are right in line with Baltimore Gas and Electric, Commonwealth Edison, Consolidated Edison, New York, right in that $2.40 to $1 ratio. So the benefits outweigh the cost more than 2 to 1. And we had them run it both ways, nominal benefit cost and net present value. And you know, net present value isn't as high, it's 1.3, but it's still a positive benefit for every dollar invested. So specifically on slide 14, these would be where the dollars would go in the downtown St. Louis Underground revitalization project. It would help address things that you saw that occurred here this past Monday. Again, parts of the underground distribution system in St. Louis are 80 to 100 years old today. Certainly underground equipment failures can lead to catastrophic outcomes, even something as what you would think is benign as stoplights. You heard the mayor's assistant earlier talking about, we have to do different things to control traffic when there's no power to run our stoplights. So all of those things are spelled out here. It shows what the current spend targets are, 18 through 2022, and then what the proposed incremental spend would be. So it would grow from $5 million in the first year incrementally to $10 million per year after that through 2022. Slide 15, this is the aggregate of this $1 billion grid investment plan. Overall, 3,372 jobs, direct and indirect, created. Direct and indirect earnings, $208.6 million. Our direct and indirect output would be $827 million. And this is one that seems to get many of our state senators' attention, is $10.4 million in additional tax dollars that are generated. We've broken that down for the 33 sitting state senators by their Senate district to say this much would go to your district, these would be the projects, and we've tried to really bring all of this back so it would be very local for them, so we can ensure support for this bill. The two other things that Stephanie gave you, there's a fact sheet that's two-sided that has many of the talking points I've just gone through with you guys, but it looks like this. It talks about growing Missouri jobs as the heading. And then the second piece, and maybe the most important one, is this supporters list. We've gone out to businesses and communities and done presentations similar to this and asked for businesses, organizations, communities, associations to sign on and lend their name to the supporters list. We number 182 supporters on the list right now. You can see many of the companies that are listed. We have added to the PowerPoint slide, slide 16, you'll see that the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis signed on in support about 2 weeks ago, thanks to the hard work of this team over here. Marty and Stephanie and Paige Selby, they've done great work. So that represents 90 communities, as you know, in the St. Louis area. So they've come on in support of this legislation. Doe Run, south of here, Worldwide Technology, Centene, ABB, Alberici, many of the big St. Louis companies. And I guess two others I want to point out. The Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry is in support of this, as is the Missouri Society of Professional Engineers, and then the Missouri Economic Development Council. They represent 350 economic developers around the state, and they said, we need these jobs badly. So that's the supporters list, and the policy statement, if you will, that they signed on in support of is on the back side of that supporters list. So Senate Bill 190 is what we have been pursuing. It's known as the Missouri Economic Development and Infrastructure Investment Act. We've been told by the 2 or 3 senators that are not in favor of this legislation still that they would like to see something else proposed. So we have 2 amendments that were added to Senate Bill 302 just last Friday. It went to a conference committee today. The House added these 2 amendments, so it had to have 5 state reps, 5 state senators go on a committee this morning at 9:30. I'm anxious to see my emails and see how that turned out. But House Amendment 1 and 2 were added. 1 would be enabling language. I'm sorry, House Amendment 2 is enabling language to allow us to do much of what Senate Bill 190 purported. So that allows the PSC to have all these tools in their toolbox to allow and incent and encourage more investment. House Amendment 1 is specific to restarting an aluminum smelter down at New Madrid. After Noranda went away, there's a new owner that wants to reopen that smelter and bring back maybe a third to a half of the production line of that smelter. There's also an out-of-country company looking to bring a new steel mill to the Boot Heel. So House Amendment 1 would allow the PSC to have the authority to work with us or another utility down there, even the rural electric cooperatives, to say we want to have a competitive global energy rate to help attract those 500 to 600 jobs to that part of the state. Because that part of the state will really need those jobs. It certainly does after losing 900 and some odd jobs when Noranda went away. But also, it would help our whole state's economy through tax benefits and whatnot. So in summary, guys, this type of legislation helps grow a healthy economy for Missouri. It does help create more value for our customers. We would harden the grid against cyber and physical attacks, have more smart switching, smart meters, things that really save customers because you're not sending a line crew or a serviceman out all the time. If someone we turn their meter off for non-payment, you can do that remotely under these new technologies and then return them right back on as soon as their check clears or their debit card. So it saves so much on operating costs. Ameren, Illinois just filed its 5th rate decrease. Ameren, Illinois just filed its 5th rate decrease about a month ago, since 2011. So they are seeing some economies of scale and some savings, some real savings for customers as a result of this kind of work. So I tried to get through it quickly so I wouldn't eat up a lot of your time, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions, guys. We would love to have support from this committee or the entire Board of Aldermen, whatever would be appropriate to send another signal to some of these senators that we have another very significant, influential group from the city of St. Louis that says we need to invest in our electric grid. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Sound like it's a well-needed bill. So it's really not gonna cost the taxpayers anything.
There is no taxpayer impact. It will, over time, perhaps increase, in the short term, electric rates for Ameren, Missouri customers by $1 a month to accommodate those new investments. But as we've seen in Illinois, over time, costs are driven down through the efficiencies gained by doing this new technology.
So this particular bill, when you stated earlier, when you're making an investment, let's say, like it's gonna cost you $100 million to put in some, maybe some transform stations or what have you. You borrow the money from the bank, and the bank said, okay, we're gonna loan it to you. And then who makes a determination, like you said earlier, say, look, that's not a $100 million project, that's only worth $70 million. So who makes that determination?
That's the Missouri Public Service Commission. Those are 5 commissioners appointed by the governor that are set in Jeff City, and they oversee the investor-owned electric, natural gas, water, and sewer utilities. Any that are investor-owned, that are basically monopolies, they govern them because as they view us, since we're not a competitive type utility, they are sort of the pseudo-competition, if you will. So, yeah, and they regulate our rates, they regulate what we can charge residential, commercial, or industrial customers for electricity. They regulate what service territory we cover. So the 5 commissioners govern everything we do.
So this bill would really help that. I mean, how would this bill help that when you won't have that problem anymore?
Yeah.
If it's worth $100 million, and can they overrule you and say, no, it's only worth 70? Or do you have kind of a fact-finding process you go through and say, look, this is 100,000, it's a $100 million project, and both we're going to keep it at 100 million, so that's what the bank's going to charge. We're going to borrow the money, so on and so forth. So we can't come back and say, I'm sorry, guys, $30 million in the hole. It's only worth 70.
Yeah.
Will this bill help that?
This legislation would set up trackers just to be able to track that cost of capital financing that accrues and track the cost of the depreciation of the asset. Right now, those are just ignored completely in the regulatory process. So the PSC just doesn't even look at those dollars. If we had this legislation in place, then they would be empowered to be able to say, so what was the value of the compounding interest? What was the asset depreciation? And I'm not saying they would guarantee we could recover that, but at least they would consider it.
I didn't know we wanted to take it.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I didn't know we were going on film. I guess that's pretty much it. So, how many jobs would really help when we get into redoing the infrastructure throughout our state? Do you know kind of about how many jobs that would really create in the state of Missouri as a whole?
But based on just Ameren, Missouri's proposed plan, 3,300 jobs. If Kansas City Power and Light and Empire District at Joplin do similar things, you would see even additional jobs. But under our $1 billion 5-year plan, we are estimating 3,300 new jobs would be created, both direct and indirect, to our state's economy.
Right. And is Ameren UE throughout the whole state of Missouri?
No, if you look at that map on...
Not a map, yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Let me find that right page again.
And it's, I guess the same with Illinois. I guess if you live in Chicago, they don't have Ameren UE. It's
No,
another
that's
electric company. Okay.
Exelon, which, and they're, you know, we're Ameren Corporation, Ameren Missouri is our utility, so in Chicago, it's Exelon, and Commonwealth Edison is sort of their Ameren Missouri equivalent. But if you look in Illinois, probably about the bottom 75% of the state, Ameren, Illinois serves, but that northern top 25%, that's a different utility in Illinois. But if you look on slide 12, you will see that map. Anything that's outlined in black, shaded in green there, that's Ameren, Missouri, where we have customers across the state. We have electric customers in all of those areas, you know, that get electricity from us, and we have some natural gas customers. You know, I know you have Laclede or Spire here in St. Louis, but in Jefferson City, in Cape Girardeau, Wentzville area, we provide the natural gas to many homes and businesses there, so.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, we have 1.2 million electric customers, the actual meters. About 3 million people in the state get their electricity from Ameren, Missouri.
Yes, sir. Okay, very well. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Alderman.
Sure. Maybe I just missed it, but what specific changes are in the policy? Does that just allow more for the Public Service Commission to take into consideration the cost of fund carry? I mean, effectively, right, the negative arbitrage, right? So I don't know what your cost of funds is for a project. It probably depends on the size. I imagine it's lower, given the credit rating of Ameren's probably pretty good in terms of borrowing. But is it just that they can then see the delta, and then they can make a decision on, well, we can reimburse you faster? Or what are there further tweaks to the language that says, okay, we've got this information, yeah, wow, Ameren's borrowing money, I'd call it 4.5% or 5%, and they're not getting repaid on a capital improvement project for 24, 26 months. That's a hit, obviously, and rate adjustments are probably going to have to be needed for that expense. What can they do with the information, and do you further address that down the line?
The provisions that were in Senate Bill 190, and really would be a part of Senate Bill 302, would not expedite any recovery. It would just say, at least acknowledge in the next formal regulatory rate review filing.
I see.
So we don't just ignore those dollars on interest, compounding interest that we've spent, or asset depreciation, because today they're ignored by and large. So we're asking the PSC set up trackers so we can track those dollars, and then at the next regular review, which maybe every 2-3 year interval.
So in theory, you'd be looking for them to see that information when rates are getting adjusted in the future.
Correct.
And with a hope that they will make you whole for that kind of that negative carry that you went through. I understand. Okay.
Or at least partially address it.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
completely
Well,
ignore it.
yeah,
Which is
it
the
should
case
not
now.
be. I agree with you there. And if that's the tweak that they should be, I would argue that that should be part of the calculus.
Yeah.
For Pete's sake. Okay. I had another question just regarding, we talked about, could you just maybe, not go into too much detail, but on the specific outcomes of modernizing kind of the infrastructure, like grid revitalization and microgrids? I mean, just real quick, not getting too wonky or with too much jargon, but what is that? Is that fiber optics? Because I think that's a plan that I think a lot of cities have gone on sort of the grid, like Kansas City, for example, and I don't know if that technology is addressed in this plan or not.
I won't say specifically fiber optics, but basically what you're able to do when you put in more self or remote controlled switching and hardened grids, that it's almost self-healing. You know, if the grid senses there's a power outage, a tree falls on a power line somewhere, and the grid, if you've got smart grid technology, it should be able to reroute that circuit, go around it, and keep customers from losing power. So maybe prevent some outages entirely. If you do have an outage, you're able to sense that more with modern technology, and it really does prevent some of the O&M costs by sending crews out to walk down a line. There certainly will still be some of that. But like I said, even the smart meter technology, we've seen such great benefits at Ameren, Illinois, because again, if someone gets into a position they can't pay their bill, used to have to roll a service worker truck out there, it might cost $30 to $100 depending on distance to go and boot that meter to turn power off to that customer. And then their check clears, or they go to a pay station and make a payment. Then the next day he may have to go back out and unboot that meter. So all of those O&M costs will be avoided because you could push a button in an office to turn the meter off, turn it back on. Those are the kind of real savings we're starting to see in Illinois.
I see.
That are really benefiting customers. Like I said, you see your 5th rate decrease filing in, the last 7 years or so. It's been pretty significant, starting to be meaningful to customers there.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Alderman Vaquero has a question.
I do. It has, since I wasn't here for this whole thing, but it has to do with the lights in the alley. Ameren is the one who covers all the lights in all the alleys in the city. And they're, I guess it's whatever, sodium lights or whatever back there. And in the city, on the city lights, we're going to all LED. Is there a plan from Ameren to start going LED in the alley for the cost savings?
Yeah, I don't know about alleys, but certainly streetlights that Ameren owns and operates across our system, it's not an immediate replacement. As lights begin to fail or they're due for a scheduled maintenance, we are changing out high-pressure sodium or mercury vapor to LED lights. I live in Jefferson City, and my neighborhood's pretty much converted already. So it really depends on the need for that area. But yes, is it a 5-year plan, Steph, do you remember? 5-year plan to convert all of our streetlights to LEDs.
Would that include the, because all of our alleys are maintained by Ameren. And the city doesn't maintain those. We pay a fee, but we don't pay. So is the plan over 5 years to change all the alley lights to LED also?
Frank, my mind's not gone yet.
And, okay, and I think we have some cards, but then we also have new people here. Is there a contact person that we can get a hold of as these alley lights go out? I have one, but I know there's a lot of new people.
Yep.
So, yeah,
I have Ms. Robinson's card.
Okay, and I have it, so. Right, okay, just want to make sure that for new people that they did have that. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, guys?
Go ahead.
Just one, kind of off base, just like the Alderman mentioned earlier. You know, this cyberspace, we always hear about how unsafe it is now and dealing with the grids and, kind of case in point like Russia. If somebody comes in and hacks us, can they cut all the power off? I mean, how true is that? I mean, is your system really secure is the point I'm trying to really make, where, the power can't be killed or some type of, virus that may come in and create a problem with your system. I mean, just kind of elaborate on that a little bit, just your opinion on that and what you think.
Yeah, this legislation is designed to help harden the grid against physical attacks, people with rifles shooting out equipment. It's also designed to harden it against those cyber attacks. And they are very real. We saw that in Ukraine about a year and a half ago now. Russia actually hacked into Ukraine and took about 80,000 customers out of electricity for 6 to 7 hours. And they were able to get a virus in, through somebody's email. An employee at the utility opened an email that had a virus attached to it, and it started shutting down substations. So it is a real threat, and that's partly what we want to do. I mean, our system, we've upgraded much of it, but much of it still is that 1960s technology that this bill would help us begin to address, updating more equipment faster.
And make it more secure.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to that. Okay, very good. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have a question. So, for, I guess, last year, maybe a couple of years before that Ameren UE was sponsoring and taking people around to visit different plants on site, tours, and show them what was going on and everything. Do they possibly have any plans maybe this year of doing something?
We certainly can schedule some things. I work with the legislators to do those infrastructure tours. We work with Marty and her group and staff. We're happy to schedule anything. If you want to see substations, overhead, underground. I'm still badged at the nuclear plant. If you guys ever want to come to Callaway to see the nuclear plant, we'll coordinate that because we'd love to show that place off. It's a fascinating way to make electricity. But yeah, we're happy to host you for any tours.
In the past, that's what, so if you're going to do that, if you could send the list again. I know it wasn't just the city, but I did find it kind of interesting to see what was going on with the hydro plants and what was going on with the nuclear plant. And it was kind of interesting to see how different, like the coal has to run all the time, where the hydro was on and off. And I found it interesting. I thought it might be interesting to go back on a couple of them. So,
if you all want to do any of the tours of any of our plants, just reach out to me, and if you want to get your group involved or whatever, just let me know, we can put that together
well,
at any time.
I'd rather just join in on a group that's already going rather than, I mean, are you going to schedule, because when we went, it was like the mayor of different areas, and it was a whole, we actually drove, I actually drove myself, but some people went on a bus, some of them, but I just, rather than have a tour for just us.
Well, but it's okay though, if that's what you want to do, we can certainly do that, that's not a problem. But we will offer those tours again, because we've gotten a lot of response and feedback from it. So people want to do these tours.
So,
We'll be starting that up again and sending out an email to everybody about the area of the plants that we're going to be visiting, so.
otherwise, if I'm out by one of the plants and want to tour it, just call you and say, hey, I'm going to be in the area?
If that's what you want to do.
Well, I don't know that I want to do, I was just,
Yeah.
okay. And I think I will grab your card again, just for the fun of it.
We might be able to do that with any location except the nuclear plant. It takes a little lead time to get you guys in there, but yeah, we're happy to host any of those kind of tours, and either Steph and her group will do it, or I can join in, whatever you guys want to do, because it's, to me, education is so important, because most people honestly don't know, they flip the switch, the lights come on, that's all they think about. So to see all those upstream processes, it really is important.
Well, no, and I found it fascinating that all the electric goes onto a grid that goes to like Kentucky or somewhere, and then you sell onto the grid during the day, and you buy back off the grid at night, and it was kind of interesting how that worked.
Yeah.
And, like what they would, at Tomsock, they would sell the electric in the day, then when they reverse the motor and pump it up, they do that at night when electric's cheaper. So I thought it was really interesting, and there's some stuff I probably still had questions about. I would love to go back and see.
Yeah, Tom Salk is fascinating, I agree.
Well, that was interesting. It's got a big hole in the middle. They drain it
Yeah,
in the day and make money, and then they turn around and reverse that generator into a motor. They pump it all back up to the night. They buy back electric in the evenings. They sell it in the day.
yeah.
Then it all goes, I think it was Kentucky or somewhere.
Well, it goes into the grid. St. Louis, being in the middle of the country, we're interconnected with about 32 other utilities. So that's the beauty. We can buy and sell to whoever, and really, we don't control all of that. The Mid-Continent System, Independent System Operator is in Indianapolis. They run the grid for the whole middle
There it
part of
is,
the country.
Indianapolis, that's what
So
it was.
we have to bid our power prices into them pretty much every day, and they decide, okay, turn that power plant on, bring that one down a little bit. They control what we do. But
I
that's-
thought it was interesting. I always thought those big gates you see the water coming out but that's only to keep the river at a certain level. And I was fascinated how, when it would go through the generator, it was kind of an interesting,
Yeah.
I had a good time on that.
Thank you, and I apologize, we couldn't get more of the committee members here, but I think what we heard today, moving forward, going ahead, it gives us a head start, and I mean, it's something we really need, and I think we'll all realize that, and looking forward to getting this bill together and getting it through, and hopefully other colleagues will see it the same way.
Well, thank you for
So,
that.
I appreciate and thank you for your time coming down.
Well, thank you for letting me come in and present. I appreciate it very much. And thanks for your support of Ameren, Missouri. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.